Welcome back to Building the Pride. I am Drew and I am sick. So I don't know how long my voice is going to hold. I have my trusty coffee and then my backup water bottle to try and keep things moving along. But without Mike, I'm going to be talking even more. So try and turn down the volume on my notifications over here. All right. Mike always does a banner. Let's make a new banner. And it was not a cool banner. It was a terrible banner. The score of the game, Vikings more points than the Detroit Lions. It was 27-24. So let's see. Vikings 27-24 over Detroit. I guess we don't need the period in there. All right. Ooh, let's have it scroll across the bottom. Is that not how it works? Okay. So last Sunday, the Detroit Lions hosted the Minnesota Vikings coming off of a bye. The Vikings, Carson Wentz, out for the season with a myriad of ridiculous arm injuries that he played through for 2 games somehow. And starting J.J. McCarthy, for all intents and purposes, a rookie quarterback playing in his 3rd game coming off of a high ankle sprain. Lions had gotten back Ali McNeil. They had Brian Branch coming off of suspension. Terry and Arnold came back from his injury, and they were getting healthier. Every indication was that the Detroit Lions would take care of business, handle the Minnesota Vikings. And what we got was a Minnesota Vikings team that had just decided that day they weren't going to do it again. And they went into a hostile environment and they punched the Detroit Lions square in the face. And this game, to me, the final score just does not indicate the way that this game was played. If you were to watch this, if you were to look at this final score and then go back and watch the game, I think that you would be disappointed with the lack of, I thought, competitiveness. Season was online. So we're going to talk about that in the middle. Yeah, I don't know why. I must be doing something different than Mike when I post the stream, because nobody's YouTube IDs come through. Is that you, Hatters? So I don't know why that's changed all of a sudden, but I don't like it. So yeah, let's take a look at it. Let's just take a look at what Hatter said real quick. So the Vikings are 500. They're 4-4. So they were 3-4. If they go to 3-5, it does seem like it's Zako. I'm sorry, dude. Hey, Zako, what's going on? I don't know why the StreamYard isn't indicating like people's normal handles that they have. Anyways, I'm sorry, dude. If you go to 3-5, it's probably going to be really difficult to climb back into the divisional standings and have a chance at a wild card. So right now in the NFC North, Green Bay is 5-2-1. The Detroit and Chicago are 5-3, and the Vikings are 4-4. So yeah, so if Detroit had gone to 6-3 and the Vikings were 3-5, it's probably much more difficult to claw your way back into playoff contention. That's a good point. I was watching this. I'm trying not to complain. Like, one of the things that I'm really working on in my personal life is not complaining about things. Like this football game is a good example, right? So if I wanted the Lions to win, they didn't. I had unbelievably high expectations, apparently. I thought the Lions were going to just go in and crush They would run. The Vikings have not been able to stop the run all year, and they did today for some reason. And the Vikings had not had much in the way of good quarterback play. And if you look at the stats, I would say J.J. McCarthy didn't light the world on fire from an efficiency standpoint, but he threw for a touchdown pass. He ran for one on a play that when he ran for that touchdown and Alex Anzalone came up to stop him, he barely even had to run around him. He just kind of like changed the direction of his hips slightly, and Anzalone just flew by. I've watched the game twice. I don't understand that play at all. And then with the game on the line, he throws an absolute dime to Jalen Naylor, who makes a wonderful catch to give the Vikings a first down to let them kneel the game out. And the odds weren't high that the Lions were going to win at that point. But there was a chance, and the Vikings just took that chance away. The game shouldn't have been close, in my opinion. They outplayed us and outcoached us, couldn't run the ball or block. Gibbs was a problem in pass pro, one of his worst games. I mean, I don't think that anybody, I'm not saying that you don't, Zaquo, but like my mom has now started watching football games with my dad and I, and she's starting to get to the point where with like picking stuff up from just like osmosis and like having been around the sport a little bit. She was like, why aren't the Lions doing better? And I'm like, well, you see this little running back right here? Yeah, Gibbs. Isn't he supposed to be like real fast? Yeah, Mom, he is. And then she was like, so why is he picking up? Aren't linebackers bigger than running backs? Yeah, Mom, they are. And so why is he blocking a bigger guy who's running at him really fast? And I was like, that's a great question, Mom. I don't have an answer for you. She's been a lot of fun to like watch games with and that kind of thing. So, and the kind of questions that she's posing, I'm sitting here as someone who's been watching football for 35 years, unable to answer them. Like, over the last 2 seasons, the Lions have played against Brian Flores and his vaunted Flores defense, which is unlike any other defense in the NFL. And they have handled the pressure well. Goff made good decisions with the ball well, against that pressure or drops, whatever they were doing. The Lions ran the ball well against that defense. And for whatever reason, my God in heaven, for whatever reason, the Lions just did not do that. So I went and I watched a couple of videos. I listened to all my normal podcasts. I went to try and look at some all 22 film. And I think the Vikings just threw a wrinkle into the game plan that forced the Lions. I think what they did was they knew what the Lions were going to check to. And so now they kind of like next level Detroit. So they were like, we're going to give them this look. Goff is going to come up to the line. Goff is going to check into this. And then we know what that play is, or we have a good idea what that play is going to be, or that type of play. And that's going to put Jahmyr Gibbs into a pass protect role as opposed to like handing the ball off, right? And then once they got that matchup, they exploited it, and it was an all-around poor effort. They had a kick blocked, which just kind of felt like the right thing. They gave up a kick return touchdown, which I'm not used to. I mean, I'm just not used to seeing that kind of stuff from their special teams unit. But the Vikings came to play, and like their offense was excellent, their defense was excellent, and their special teams were good. They just beat the Lions in all 3 phases. And here's the thing, to kind of reference back to something Zaquo said earlier, like the Lions were coming out of a bye, which means they should have been rested, prepared, and have a plan. And it just did not seem like any of those things were really true. They might have been rested, but then why didn't they outwork the Vikings? If you're gonna have your culture built upon grit and toughness and next man up and all these terms, which the Lions, to their credit, have stuck to now for like this is Dan Campbell's 5th season. I still believe that the team is all of those things, but like now if somebody comes in and out grits you, you're in a lot of trouble, because one thing that grit is supposed to help you do is like, well, maybe we're not the most talented, players, quote unquote, on in the league, but we're going to work harder. We're going to want it more, than you guys do. And like this game, it was very clear the Vikings just wanted the game more. And that showed itself in their effort on the field, their preparation that came in, for the game. And I'm going to talk about the QB situation here in a second. Oh, thank you very much, Donkey Kong. That is very nice of you. I hope you have a great day too. Situationally, they just outplayed us. Doesn't help that we are in 3rd and long every drive. Morton's got to be better running long. Developing routes against the blitz is a recipe for disaster. Yeah. So I saw some crazy stat that, and I'm not 100% that this is true, but it's approximate. This season on 3rd and 10 plus, the Lions are 0 for 21. Now, I don't know what an average 3rd and 10 plus conversion rate would look like across the NFL, but I'm betting it's more than 0. So here's what I want to talk about with that, because I think it speaks exactly to your point. The Vikings put Detroit in 3rd and long a lot, right? And that was helped because the Lions had as many penalties in this game as they have committed all season, which doesn't make any sense coming out of a bye. Like, you should have these kinds of things locked up, like coached out, like set up. So the Lions had 10 penalties for 76 yards. So an average of 7.5 yards per penalty. So very off-brand for the Lions, who want to eliminate these kinds of mistakes. Most of those mistakes are within the control of the Detroit Lions to eliminate, right? These are not like a ball bounces off Kindle Wilder's face mask right into Brian and Ayuk's hands during the NFC Championship game, right? Like, that's not that kind of mistake. It's don't commit a false start penalty. Like, I mean, we know every offensive lineman in the NFL holds on almost every play, but don't make it egregious, like line up onside, just that kind of stuff. And there were a lot of problems with that kind of thing, and it put Detroit behind the chain. So here's my talking point. 13 minutes into the show here is that the Detroit Lions and the John Morton offense, I don't have a big problem with, but the major issue that I have with John Morton is that he does not seem to be concerned about the down and distance and like the gradual accumulation of down and distance on like drives or over the course of a game. He seems like he comes into a game with a goal. Like, we're going to get JMO more involved, or we want to hit 15-yard, run plays or whatever. So everything's going to be tailored to that, as opposed to let's get Goff into a rhythm in the first 15 plays. So we're going to run 6 runs and 6 passes in our first 15, right? Or whatever, somewhere around there. And 5 of those are going to go to either St. Brown or Laporta, somewhere between 4 and 6 yards off the line of scrimmage. And then the other runs are going to be straight up the middle between Tate Ratledge and Penei Sewell. And we just do not seem to do that as often this season. And it puts the Lions in a lot of like oh, it's 2nd and 8, and then it's 3rd and 6, as opposed to, last year it seemed like there were a ton of like, it's 2nd and 4, and then you get a 2-yard run, and now it's 3rd and 2, and like the whole playbook is open to you. And I've been kind of like low key complaining about, which I know I said I wasn't trying to complain about things anymore, but like I've been low key complaining about the fact that like the disparity in opportunities between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery this season, I think, is hurting us. And this is the way that it's hurting us, is that David Montgomery is the kind of back that if you run the same exact running play for Gibbs and Montgomery in the same exact situation, David Montgomery is going to get on average 1 to 2 yards more than Jahmyr Gibbs, because David Montgomery just falls forward and moves the pile. And I love Jahmyr Gibbs, and I think that he's an excellent offensive weapon. But like, when the Lions drafted him and Brad Holmes said, like, this guy is a weapon, can we please see what that looks like? Like, what does that look like? What does Jahmyr Gibbs being an offensive weapon really look like? Because to me, if you take a running back at 12 and it's this kind of player, this kind of like Sonic, Sonic and Knuckles, like, and this is Sonic, or the lightning back and the lightning and thunder combo. Like, it's his speed. Okay. Or it's his elusiveness. Okay. Or it's his ability to catch passes out of the backfield. Okay. But we have seen so little of that from Gibbs this season that I'm starting to wonder if the plan to use Gibbs as a weapon is just incorrect. And like, to me, the Lions need to take a step back on offense, simplify things, and just get a meat and potatoes diet of, this has worked in the past, we're going to continue to work this. And I don't give a shit if they throw the ball to Amon-Ra St. Brown 15 times a game. Like, move the chains. We got to move the change. When the Ben Johnson offense was here in Detroit, like, he didn't just swing for home runs all the time. Like, it was like, I'm going to get a single, then I'm going to get a double, then it's like 2 more singles, and then I'm going to get a home run. It was like he set things up pretty well, especially for later in the game. And this is the first time that John Morton has really called plays. So like, I'm willing to give him this year, and I'm willing to give him next year to become situationally aware of what needs to go on, but you cannot lose sight. And that's the thing that I think that Ben Johnson did his whole time in Detroit, except with the example of the Washington playoff game, which was that he just kept on target with what makes Detroit football so effective on offense and so efficient on offense, which is, let's get a couple of first downs and put ourselves in a position for, like, okay, now we're on their side of the field. Now 4th down is an option. Or now we're in position to run a trick play, or what have you, as opposed to, let's go get 15 yards on 2nd and 10. So that's my big problem with John Morton, is not that he is wildly different or not immediately successful, but that he seems to have deviated from what I look at as the quintessential thing that the Detroit Lions offense was built for and is good at, in search of something that I'm not exactly certain what it is. All that being said, the Lions scored 24 points on Sunday. That is enough to win a lot of football games in the NFL. So let's look at the defense. We had Kirby Joseph was out in this game, and I think that mattered. And I want to talk about Terrion Arnold. Okay. Terrion Arnold was not matched up with Justin Jefferson all game. That job went to Amik Robertson. And in the past, especially last season, Amik Robertson has played Justin Jefferson pretty well. Not today, though. And Terrian, I thought, played great. And it's not just because he had an interception. I mean, he was in people's hip pockets. He wasn't penalized. Amik was. And if you get this kind of performance from Terrian Arnold week in, week out, I think he's an absolute, at least a starter on this team. There are people out there that's like, well, we should have made a trade or we need help at corner. I don't think that that's accurate at all. I think you have DJ Reed, who's unfortunately not playing right now, and he's coming back in week 12, I believe. And Terrian Arnold is in year 2. And we can't even really judge him until the end of next season. So he's only halfway through this kind of evaluation period that you should give to most rookies, especially first round picks. The other thing that I think is strange is that, like, in the game against the Buccaneers, we had every backup practice squad player in the secondary playing. Rock Ya-Sin, Arthur Mollett, Nick Whiteside, Lauren Strickland, Eric Hallett. I think it's Eric Hallett. I'm not entirely sure on the guy's first name. Those guys all played great against the Bucs. But they played a lot of snaps, right? And maybe that is the difference, because they didn't play a lot of snaps because Branch was back, because Arnold was back, that kind of thing. But those guys just didn't play well. Certainly not as well as they played against Tampa Bay. So Thomas Harper, that's the other guy. Thank you, Zekwa. So both Thomas Harper and Nick Whiteside, I think, are keeps when it comes to what this team looks like next year. Guys like Rock Ya-Sin, Avonte Maddox, there are the possibility that they're going to get re-signed. They're both on 1-year deals. But if you promote guys like Harper and Whiteside, I think that you have better long-term development and higher upsides on both those players than Ya-Sin and Maddox. So let's take a look. Mike's always really good at this kind of stuff while I'm talking, so you're just going to have to bear with, as they say. Let's take a look at the Lions PFF grades. Oops, let's go the other way here. From this game, and like your point about putting Branch at nickel is very well received, Zekwa. I think that that's the best place to play him. He seems like the kind of guy who benefits from being closer to the line of scrimmage. And I think the issue is that there's no one else who can do what he does in the back end as a starter. So, I think that I really like that idea, because I don't think Amik Robertson's going to be on the team next year. Maybe we can talk about that in a little bit. But Frank Ragnow, I think it was the timing of Ragnow's retirement that really hurt this team. Like, it came after the draft, so there was no option in the off season or the draft to kind of address. I mean, we'd be a year ahead on the offensive line, and maybe they did have an inkling and they took Ratledge with we can kick him to center. I don't want to kick Ratledge to center. I think that he's a good right guard, and I want him at right guard, and anyways, we can talk about that more. So let's take a look at the grades. So right at the top, here you go. Penei Sewell, just a beast, an absolute beast. Here's the thing that I think is indicative of a problem in the line. Look at this. He was in for 64 plays, so that's the entirety of the offense. They ran twice as many passes as they did runs. this has got to be closer to 50-50. This should be 30-something and 30-something or close to it. And I'm not going to try. I'm trying not to. Yeah. I'm not trying to start an argument here, but like this game brought back every negative thing I've ever thought about Jared Goff. Oh, fan man, we're going to get to Glasgow's grade because it's going to reinforce, I think, a lot of people's opinions of who he is as a player right now. But let's do some of the good stuff first. Like Sam Laporta had that wonderful offensive drive, and then we just didn't continue to use him nearly as much. I don't understand it. Goff is up here third. I don't understand that at all. Like he played awful as far as I was concerned. St. Brown, Jamison Williams had a really great catch near the end of the game that kind of kept us in it. Skipper came in for Decker for a couple of snaps and played admirably. Ratledge is kind of hanging around like this just above replacement. Iwoshika had to come in. Here's a guy that I don't understand what we're doing with. Tisla. Last season, the Lions had Tim Patrick on the field a bunch, right? 6'4", great big guy, almost a tight end. Isaac Tisla is like the same exact player, like height, weight, speed wise. And like, can you not just put him out there and block? I mean, having this, like, I don't understand why Khalif Raymond is getting 29 snaps in a game. Like, this should be reversed to me. Like, Isaac Tisla should be getting 30 snaps a game. And just, even if he's out there just to block, like, it's one more blocker. Like, Khalif Raymond, I love him. But he is backup Jamison Williams and a kick returner, punt returner. Like, and that's what he's good at. Right, they did say that a month ago. Exactly right. Like that, and this is the problem. Like, I'm wondering if there's some, like, in Allen Park after these games, if Dan Campbell is having meetings with John Morton, he's like, "Hey, John, I went on, the presser, and I said that we would be getting Isaac some more snaps, and like you put him in for 3 snaps today. Can you tell me why that is?" Well, we wanted A, B, and C. I don't give a shit about that. I don't care what his answer is. Like the reason that Khalif Raymond is in the game is that I think that John Morton wants to attack the sides of an offense, of a defense, and I hate that. Like, I grew up a Michigan fan, and like I think that the end zone is 100 yards straight in front of you. You don't get any closer to it when you attack the edges of NFL defenses. Defenses are too fast now to just consistently get to the edge. I hate these little wide receiver screens that they throw. I hate these long running outside tackle runs that they run. Like, between the tackles, straight down the field, in the middle of the field. That's what Goff is good at. That's where the points are. The points are in that direction, not that direction. If Dan takes the reins, it's going to be a real indictment of John Morton. Christian Mahogany had a bad game. He was abused in pass protection and then got hurt, and he's probably out for the year. I've heard anything from saying that he'll be back in 6 weeks to he's out for, like, he could be out for the season. So we have no clarity right now on how long he's going to be out. Here's Jahmyr Gibbs, and this just reinforces one of my things that I believe about Jahmyr Gibbs, is that he's just not as good as David Montgomery. And here's David Montgomery below Gibbs. So I understand why people are going to be like, nah, you're wrong. But at the same time, I'm like, the reason that both Gibbs and Montgomery are down here is that their pass blocking grades are horrible. But, like, where is... I guess we don't have that. Anyways, I still think that David Montgomery needs to be getting... He got 24 snaps. Gibbs got 42. That's still too big of a discrepancy, for my opinion. Taylor Decker is not healthy. He got abused in this game. And here's the bottom of the list, Graham Glasgow. And, like, here's the reason why Glasgow is so low on this list. for me is that consistently throughout the game, the Vikings ran stunts and Glasgow didn't pick them up, or didn't communicate to whom he needed to communicate with in order to pick up the stunt. So and Goff was under pressure, and Goff played terribly under pressure. I know the grade says that he played pretty well. I don't agree with the grade. Like, from what I witnessed, I was like, so here's the difference. So let's just swing this around just really quickly. Let's look at where JJ McCarthy is. JJ McCarthy scored lower than Jared Goff did by 11 points. But if you were the Lions in this game, wouldn't you have rather had the performance that McCarthy had than Jared Goff? Wouldn't you want a quarterback that can? I mean, did you see the spiral that McCarthy had on his ball? I mean, the ability to run around a linebacker and get a touchdown after his pass blocking broke down. I want the Lions not to have JJ McCarthy, but to have someone like him who can do those things. I mean, can you imagine if Baker Mayfield if Jared Goff and Baker Mayfield were just switched, what this offense would look like with a semi-mobile quarterback? I appreciate what Jared Goff has done for the Detroit Lions. They're going to pay him $70 million next year. I just have a hard time believing that the Lions are able to win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. I just don't believe it. Goff didn't cost us the game. I don't think that he cost us the game, right? But I do think that, my point here is that I don't think that he did much to help us win it, right? Like, JJ McCarthy made several plays in this game that I think helped the Minnesota Vikings win the game. He, Jared, they each threw for a touchdown, right? McCarthy ran for one. And then that pass at the end that gave him a first down to Naylor was an absolute dime, and the two players on that play made excellent plays, Naylor and McCarthy. And I just don't see Jared Goff, quote unquote, making plays. I see him running the offense. And when everybody else is doing really well, Jared Goff performs a lot better, right? That makes sense. But when everyone else isn't performing well, Jared Goff also gets a lot worse. And there's no ability for him to elevate the rest of the team. So I have a problem. With that. Let's look at the defense just real quickly. Yeah, Grant Stewart, 2 snaps. Good job, buddy. Derek Barnes, Alex Anzalone, kind of a surprise on Anzalone being up here. Tyleik Williams. So Aleem McNeil comes back. Tyleik Williams goes down to 11 snaps, right? So, poor man's Matt Ryan, right? You spend a first-round pick on Tyleik Williams, right? And he's probably going to be a rotational or a backup to Aleem McNeil. But Aleem McNeil is on a contract extension I don't think he's yet playing on. This is the last year. Yeah, this is the last year of his rookie deal. So he's on a 4-year extension after this year. So unless Tyleik Williams is going to be new DJ Reader, you spent a first-round pick on a backup. Okay. All right. Let's continue on. Tyleik Williams. Aiden Hutchinson just could not tackle well in this game for some reason. Good pass rush. 7 pressures, 1 sack, 2 hits, tackle for loss. But kind of a down game for him. Jack Campbell, who's been playing great this year, better at tackling, good run defense, nice pass rush, couldn't cover. DJ Reader got 32 snaps. Okay. The Lions did a good job against the Vikings running game, I thought, most of the time. Roy Lopez, backup DJ Reader, got more snaps than Tyleik Williams. Okay. Tyler Lacey, defensive end. So this is backup Marcus Davenport. 31 snaps. That's 20 snaps more than Tyleik Williams. Rock Ya-Sin, Nick Whiteside, Pat O'Connor, Al-Qadim Muhammad, Tyrus Wheat. Here we go. Harper, Branch, Mollett, Arnold. Here's Aleem McNeil, still knocking off some of that rust. Got 51 snaps. Amik Robertson, 59 snaps. Almost our entire secondary? Rock Ya-Sin was a 10th and played 3 snaps. Nick Whiteside, 1 snap. Here's our entire secondary playing below the level of expectation in this game. I don't know why that is. I don't know why the entire secondary was burned as hard as it was burned against the Vikings. JJ was not actually, he was 14 of 25. So I'm not sure how the Lions secondary was this ineffective, but they were, and it cost them, and there's a lot of injuries. Like DJ Reed is still hurt, and this Rakestraw is out for the season. Who am I forgetting? Am I forgetting anybody? No? Okay. But Branch has served a suspension, and then there was a bye week, so Kirby Joseph was out. Not a great showing from the secondary. Certainly not as good as their game against Tampa, right? So there's that. Let's take a look at. Anyways, I was unbelievably disappointed, in this game from a Detroit Lions point of view, no matter how you looked at it. So the Lions have the Commanders this upcoming week. So let's take a look at that game. Now, the Lions are favored by 8 points in this game, which I think is quite a lot. So more than one score. So let's take a look at Washington and just kind of see how they line up here. Okay, so we've got, let's look at what Detroit. So Jameson Williams, St. Brown, they're still kicking. Laporta, this should be Tesla. Gibbs, Goff, that's standard. Decker, Sewell, both banged up. We're going to see how they go. Ratledge left in the game, came back in, kind of becoming a stalwart. Glasgow, people are very clearly unhappy with him because he's not Frank Ragnow. I get it. Frank Ragnow was great. And Coyote Awoshika is probably starting this game at left guard. Okay, so let's look at the vaunted Washington defense. So Trevon Kinlaw, Eddie Goldman, Deron Payne, having his best year this year. What's Bobby Wagner? Interesting. I don't see let's go nickel here for them. Okay, so here's Mikey Senior still. So they've got Jonathan Jones as one of their corners because Lattimore's out, and Trey Amos. And then their safeties are Jeremy Reeves and Quan Martin. Just looking at this right now, who is this guy? Oh, Von Miller's on this team. Interesting. So if the Lions have, if I'm the Lions, I didn't actually share the thing. I'm sorry. So if the Lions have any kind of game plan heading into this game, if I was in charge, I would be like, we are going quick passing game, 2.5 seconds, the ball's out. Everybody can run intermediate routes. Who is going to cover Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra St. Brown in this game? And like I am not afraid to run either running back on this defensive line. So, Washington's pretty much beat up, just like a lot of teams in the NFL are right now. So let's take a look at the defense here real quickly. Will Kirby Joseph come back and play in this game? If he does, great. If not, Harper has been a pretty decent stand-in. We'll have to keep watch on that. He didn't have a very good game yesterday or on Sunday. Anzalone, Campbell, who's third in the NFL, was a linebacker, nice. Derek Barnes, good. Robertson, Arnold, those are the corners. Hutch, Reeder, McNeil, Lacey. Okay. This should be Al-Qadim Muhammad as far as I'm concerned, but we'll see. Let's take a look at what's Washington working with here. You've got Deebo Samuel, Chris Moore, Jalen Lane, Zach Ertz, and their rookie running back, Krosky Merritt. It looks like Terry McLaurin's not playing in this game as of yet. We don't have confirmation. They have a rookie right tackle. I expect Aiden Hutchinson to abuse Josh Connerly in this game, and then Laramie Tunstall will try and ignore you, basically. So Marcus Mariota, I think is one of the better backup quarterbacks in the NFL, especially because he can do the same things to a degree that Jaden Daniels does for Washington's offense. It's a good pairing for like the philosophy of what Washington wants to do on offense, right? It's not like we went from Jaden Daniels to Kirk Cousins. That's a difference in style. These two guys have the same style. I expect Marcus Mariota to play effectively in this game. Who is he going to throw to, though? If the Lions come in and try and stop the run, I don't know that Deebo is really beating anybody deep. And I expect our corners to be able to match up on a talent level with their pass catchers, and then Ken Hutchinson beat up on a rookie right tackle. That's it to me. That's the matchup here. The special teams played terrible against the Vikings. They gave up a return touchdown. Washington has good returners in their kick and punt games. So the Lions are going to have to be on their assignments to make sure that doesn't happen again. The Lions also gave up a blocked, they had a kick blocked, and you can't do that. That would have been if Bates makes that field goal, we're tied, so you can't allow that kind of stuff to happen. I do think it's interesting that this season has highlighted the differences between having so many injuries on defense last year and what having just a couple of injuries on offense looks like. So if you said Frank Ragnow was hurt as opposed to retired and Graham Glasgow has to replace him, right? If Kevin Zeitler was on this team but hurt and they had to replace him with Mahogany or Ratledge or whoever, it looks different, it's the feeling is different. When you have the turnover in the roster. So the last thing, maybe not the last thing, but one of the things I want to talk about is that the trade deadline came and went, and Detroit didn't make a move. This should surprise no one. Brad Holmes has been emphatic about, I don't want to make a move at the deadline. I don't want to spend draft capital mid-season. He has done it. He brought in what is that guy's name? The pass rusher for Hutch after last year. Smith, Zadarius Smith, nailed it. I'm really good at football. So he has done it. Didn't do it this year. And then, but I'm curious, like we saw the kinds of players that were traded on Tuesday, and which of those guys that were traded did you want on this team? Like, I don't think you're trade. I mean, the problem that the Lions have right now is that I don't think that they can take on a contract of a player, starter level player, and then extend him. It's not about the player, it's about the extension. So because they have re-signed so many of their own drafted players, they have their salary cap space is drying up, which is not a surprise. But you can't then add another guy like that and then still expect to be able to sign, Laporta, Branch, Campbell, Gibbs, and then the year after be expected to be able to re-sign Arnold, Rakestraw, whomever. Like these dominoes have to keep falling. In order to keep them falling year after year after year, you can't go all in on Trey Hendrickson, right? Like if they had made a move for somebody like, can we bring Kevin Zeitler back? Okay, you have my attention. Does Kevin Zeitler mean that this team is automatically playing the way that it should have been like the whole year? Probably not. John Morton's still the OC. So, can we go and can we get some help on defense? If you had made, like, what if they had traded for Reek Woolen from Seattle? It's an interesting, great big corner, good matchup, physical, plays a lot of man. Wouldn't have minded having Reek Woolen on the team, especially if it was like one of these deals where it's like, we'll give you a 6th, you give us Woolen and a 7th. All right, you've got my attention. Because even then, say you don't want to keep Reek Woolen on the team in 2026. You let the dude walk out the door, you go into free agency. Can you get like a 7th round comp pick for Reek Woolen? Maybe. And if that's the case, like even if you get a 7th round pick and you gave up a 6th, like you're getting a lot back. Like 2 7ths. You're getting 2 7ths back. And like remember, the Lions don't have any 3rd round picks this year. We spent all of them to get Isaac Tesla. So picking up a couple extra draft picks would be helpful. And one thing that I'd like to start looking at with you guys is this idea of like depth. Like we have a lot of guys like Avante Maddox, Rocky Sin, Dan Skipper, on the roster or what have you. But I'm like, what if we like traded down out of the first, which the Lions don't need that level of player, quote unquote, anymore. They have their core. What if we traded down, from the first to the second, you pick up a 3rd round pick or a 4th round pick to move down, and then you use some of those 5th, 6th, 7ths, or you package your maybe a day 2 and a day 3 pick together to move up higher in day 2, and you pick up 4 guys between round 2 and round 4. And you say, all right, here we go. Now we have pretty good players. Like you can still find starters like on most NFL teams in the 3rd round that could be a starter for you, just depending on their position. And like, here, kid, you are the dedicated backup safety. You are the dedicated backup middle linebacker. You are the dedicated backup pass rusher. so on and so forth. And you have those guys 4 years of control and develop them, you know. Brad shit the bed 3 years in a row, dude. This is insane. I disagree. Like, you have to realize that if Brad Holmes is the kind of GM who comes out and says, I'm not going to make a move at the trade deadline, and then he doesn't, why would you expect that he would? You are talking about next season half the way through this season. Do you see this issue? This is what we did 4 years ago. This pisses me off. Well, I mean, like, we can be upset about the way that the Lions are going. They're still 5-3 and in the second spot in the division and still in the wild card right now. I disagree that he's a great GM. This team was trash for my entire life, and they have been to the playoffs I can't remember things like this very well. 2 or 3 years in a row, made an NFC title game, which I haven't seen since I was 9. You know, and they have locked up excellent players at a bunch of positions who are all young. You know, I think that I don't know what this team would look like with Brad Holmes not as the GM. I don't really want to consider what it would look like. And like this, I think that the idea, sure. I mean, like, but what is good enough for you? Is good enough for you, Dr. Detroit, a GM that makes a move at the trade deadline? Do you have to win a Super Bowl? Because only one team a year gets to win the Super Bowl, and it's really tough. Okay, so Super Bowl. So that's a good goal. That's a good goal. You know, but then by that definition, there's never been a good GM for the Detroit Lions. Right? And by that definition, 31 GMs a year are not good enough. So, but like, I think that the Detroit Lions are in a better position to win a Super Bowl under Brad Holmes than they have ever been in the entire history of the Detroit Lions since they joined the NFL. That's my opinion. So if that's fine, but like, I think that you would be unhappy if Brad Holmes went all in at the trade deadline or made the exact moves that you want him to make, and they don't win the Super Bowl, and if they bankrupt the team as far as like salary cap space, draft capital, that type of thing, and they don't win the Super Bowl, then those moves are still equally as bad as the things that you're unhappy with right now. We have been here twice before in the 90s and 2010 with Sue. With Sue meaning that like he was a really good player that they didn't maximize. Is that the point that you're trying to get across? Because like, I think you can make an excellent case like throughout the Detroit Lions history, like that they have had all pro caliber players, Barry Sanders, Matt Stafford, Calvin Johnson, and Ndamukong Suh, and they were not able to win in the playoffs, win a Super Bowl with exceptional players, right? So the difference, if that is your point, and if I'm understanding that correctly, what I would say is you have a player, maybe not as dominant as Ndamukong Suh, but like he is a once in a lifetime kind of guy in Aiden Hutchinson, right? Aiden's locked up now. You know, we didn't really lock up Ndamukong Suh. You know, you have a guy like, I mean, I think players like St. Brown, Branch, and you know, are near the top of their position groups in the NFL. And I think the guys like Jack Campbell, Ali McNeil, who we just got back, you know, this season because he was hurt, Penei Sewell, are guys at the tops, near the tops of their position groups. And the longer the timeline goes, where Detroit A has these players on their roster and can supplement them with continued like intelligent drafting and player acquisition, I think that the Lions are closer to getting to that Super Bowl. Like, I think the thing that has hurt the Lions this year is, yes, turnover at the coordinator position has hurt the Detroit Lions more so on offense than on defense. That's going to happen when you're a good team. People are going to try and get what you're doing correct onto their teams by hiring away your personnel. But I still think that Dan Campbell is a good coach. I like the continuity between Sheila Hamp, Brad Holmes, and Dan Campbell. I think that's the biggest pillar of what makes this team successful, and they are successful. So I want to win a Super Bowl as well. The guys he drafted are not as good as we had. Well, that's a good point. So let's look at that. Let's study that point in some detail. So it was the previous GM who drafted Frank Ragnow, right? Frank Ragnow is potentially a Hall of Fame level center. Okay. So that's tough. That's tough to replace. I agree. Right? Kevin Zeitler, Brad Holmes signed, on a 1-year deal, and they offered him money to stay, more money than they gave him in the first year. And Kevin Zeitler wanted to go home to Tennessee to be closer to his family. And Kevin Zeitler knew what that meant. The guy's been in the league for years. He could have stayed in a winning situation. He wanted something else, so he left. I think that Brad Holmes is a pretty good scout, or has good scouts that work for him, in which case he hired them. He was the director of college scouting for the Rams, so no, I'm not saying that he's infallible. Like, I have issues with how he has built the team as well. But I do think it's kind of unfair to say the Super Bowl is the only metric by which you can gauge whether or not he is doing a good or bad job. So I would love to see the Lions win a Super Bowl. I know Mike, my co-host, would do just about anything to see the Lions win a Super Bowl, right? It means a lot to a lot of people, right? And, if and when Campbell and Holmes bring a Super Bowl to Detroit, I think that all of this frustration and patience that the fan base has had to deal with and been asked to give year after year will be forgiven, and like, people will have it. But like, sometimes I think that professional sports and now college sports lead us to this kind of understanding that, like, you can be worst to first. In a single year, and like, to Dr. Detroit's point, I think in general, if the Detroit Lions are going to get to a point where they're going to beat elite teams in the NFL, it starts at the quarterback position. And Jared Goff, in my opinion, is not on the same level, pardon me, as guys like Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, Burrow, Jaden Daniels. I mean, and like, I think that I would have a pretty convincing case that he's the worst quarterback in the NFC North, to be honest. So like, if here's my opinion on that. If you took Jordan Love and put him on the Lions roster, I think the Lions roster can help maximize Jordan Love, right? If you took Caleb Williams and you put him on the Detroit Lions roster, I think that the Detroit Lions roster helps minimize the mistakes that Caleb Williams makes. Like, if you put J.J. McCarthy on the Detroit Lions roster, I think that the kind of like mentality that J.J. McCarthy has, that now the Minnesota Vikings have, is something that would play up great with like the grit and toughness, that the Detroit Lions culture wants to represent. So like, I am happy with the job that Sheila's done Brad Holmes has done, that Dan Campbell has done. Overall, I also have, like I'm sure most fans, and certainly you yourself, Dr. Detroit, there are some things that I could nitpick about and say I would not have done it this way. But I mean, that's one of the fun parts about sports is we get to see what happens and then think it to death, right? So I don't know what the future of Detroit holds. I think the roster is reaching kind of a saturation point, let's call it, of talent where, like, if you go out and, like, say they traded up in the NFL draft, like a big move up 20s to like inside the top 10 or inside the top 15, something like that. Like, is there a place for somebody like that to play? Right? You probably don't make that move unless there is, but like if we reviewed the roster, there's not a lot of places for play. I mean, like, I'm not going to go draft a right guard again because we've got Tate Ratledge growing into the role. You could talk to me about center and left guard, absolutely, you know. But I think that at some point we're going to have to talk about which players we let go. You know, like, do I care that Sione Vaki is a good special teamer and like our future running back 3? Not particularly. You know, do I care if Giovanni Manu like figures out how to be like a decent NFL tackle? Not really. I mean, this is year 3 and he played poorly and then got hurt. You know, like at some point you just got to cut your loss. You know, like Dan Skipper has played well in certain situations and real poorly in others. Can he be upgraded upon? I think yes. You know, so it's about where, I mean, if I was the GM of the Detroit Lions, hey guys, it's cool. Let's chill about the conversation in the chat. It's everyone in Detroit's real passionate about stuff. Let's keep it. So you want to talk? We can talk about Howie Roseman, right? So Howie Roseman is one of the GMs that I think does a couple things really, really well. Number one, I think Howie Roseman during the draft is the kind of guy, much like Eric DeCosta in Baltimore, is when their picks come up, they take, quote unquote, the best player there, right? They are best player available GMs. It doesn't matter what position the guy plays. How do they do it, right? So like he takes Quinion Mitchell, you know, a couple years ago, and then he takes Cooper DeJean, right? But like in the draft, Roseman takes tons of defensive linemen and offensive linemen, you know, and so his model varies from what Detroit's model is. Detroit's model is trying to get good players throughout the entire roster, right? Through the draft. Philly's idea is we are all in on the lines, right? So we are going to, they hit an absolute grand slam with Jordan Mailata, who was like a 7th round pick who became one of the best tackles in the NFL. Like that just doesn't happen. That's just finding lightning in a bottle. But good job, you know, but they take Lane Johnson. They have redrafted their offensive line. Like they have spent 1st and 2nd round picks on guys and then kept them on the bench until like Jason Kelsey, right? Like he was their center. And they draft Cam Jurgens as like a 2nd or 3rd round pick. And they keep Cam Jurgens on the bench for like 2 years because they know that eventually Jason Kelsey is going to retire. So they let Cam Jurgens and Jason Kelsey hang out for like 2 years, you know. But like, when was the last time the Philadelphia Eagles were bad? You know, it's good to do these things and then be successful. But like Jalen Hurts was a back end of the 2nd round quarterback selection, and then Wentz goes down, and like they had turnover at the quarterback position too. And like Jalen Hurts is not a flashy do it all quarterback, but like much like the Lions have built their offense around doing what Jared Goff is good at, the Eagles have built their offense to do the things that Jalen Hurts is good at, which is intermediate passing, and he is a mobile quarterback, and they're going to run the ball. And they should, because they have an excellent offensive line. And then he does things like he drafts Jordan Davis to be his nose tackle from Georgia. He drafts Jalen Carter. He's like, and so one of the differences between Howie Roseman and Brad Holmes is that I don't think that Howie Roseman gives a shit if whether or not a guy gets in trouble when he's in college, right? The opposite of that for Brad Holmes is Brad Holmes doesn't care if they're hurt, right? They're going to look for the value, the similarity between those two things is that each GM is looking for value in players that are going to have their perceived value drop so that they can get them where they're drafting because they're good. So like Howie Roseman's like, oh, you got in trouble with the law. Okay, we're not going to let that happen in Philadelphia, but you still might be an asshole. You can be a Philadelphia Eagle. Brad Holmes doesn't want those guys. He wants, Ali McNeil, you got hurt. Levi Muzarike, you got hurt. Jamison Williams, you got hurt. So your draft value, you're going to get drafted lower than you otherwise would have if you were healthy. And then I'm going to take you and let you heal. Howie Roseman may not be comfortable with that strategy. Holmes, I can say with some confidence, is not going to allow somebody like Jalen Carter on the roster because of who he is, and he doesn't want the culture to be messed up. So like I would not be surprised if the chat and me could go and look at all the different like draft rooms in the NFL and like read the minds of like the GMs and like who they're looking for. I'm betting that the Detroit Lions have one of the smallest lists of players they were actually willing to draft in the entire league. I will bet that the number of available people who could be drafted, the Lions only throughout rounds 1 through 7 are in about 40 of those guys. And I think that other GMs have a broader pool of players they're willing to draft from. And the reason that I think that is Brad Holmes has been very specific in the mid to late rounds about going up and targeting specific players. Isaac TeSlaa, Broderick Martin, to name a couple, right? He traded first round picks in future, or he traded future picks in order to draft Giovanni Manu and Sione Vaki, right? They didn't have picks in those rounds. He traded future higher picks in order to take those players because he saw things in them that he wanted on the Lions roster. So Howie Roseman is successful in a similar way. I think there's a lot of similarities between the way that Roseman and Holmes build their rosters. But I think the differences come in these little things on the margin. I do think that Howie is better at manipulating the draft than Brad is. But considering that Brad is this will be his, 6th draft upcoming, 5th or 6th draft upcoming, I'm not going to be too mad at him not having it all figured out, so to speak, in the way that Howie Roseman seems to. Right? But like, Brad coming so Dr. Detroit makes this point that like Brad Holmes came from like a Les Snead run front office in LA, and Les Snead is very much like, we are going to acquire the best players with our picks. That doesn't just have to be in the NFL draft. Like we will trade picks for current proven NFL talent. Matthew Stafford, Jalen Ramsey. Oh God. Who's the other guy? Who is the other guy? Why can I not think of him? Doesn't matter. So, like, if you want to root for a team that uses picks the way that the Los Angeles Rams have used them for like that decade, that's fine. But I don't expect Brad to start to do that because he has not shown any inclination to doing it yet. Yeah, so like these teams that Dr. Detroit is listing off, like they've all been successful, right? Over the history of the NFL, and they have specific philosophies on how they want to do it. So like we have hurt players on our team right now, right? So Brad Holmes loves using this quote. When asked like why don't you move picks at the deadline in order to get players, right? He says, "Well, what if I trade a pick and then that player gets hurt?" Right? So then you're out the player and the compensation. So okay, so before I'm bombarded with things in the chat, my feeling is, and I think most of the NFL's feeling is, anyone can get hurt at any time. Like ask Joe Burrow. Am I just asking, do you see the vantage point we are looking at? Oh yeah, no, I hear you. Like I mean, like this kind of like roster building thing, that's the reason I like sports. The reason I follow basketball is not because I love the game. It's because I like seeing how people change their rosters. The reason I like football is I think it's the most complex thing, most complex sport in America that has these different moving parts to it. And the thing that I'm constantly learning about, and I didn't play football and I don't know the X's and O's as well as I should to help inform some of the things that I'm saying. But I've been watching the NFL draft now for 30 years. I have a 30-year stretch of watching all 7 rounds of the NFL draft. So, I mean, like, I'm 43. I've been doing this since I was a teenager. That doesn't make me an expert by any stretch. But what I'll say is it's let me pick up on some patterns, and I think that, like, when I have looked at the Detroit Lions patterns, I've got to change, like, my expectations to fit what I'm seeing and not. I don't want to just be upset at the Detroit Lions. I did that for most of my 20s and 30s. So like I want to watch football and have a good time, right? And the Detroit Lions win a lot more football games now over the last 2.5 years than they ever did when I was watching them when I was in my 20s and 30s. And so I have an opportunity because I like the Detroit Lions to study how Brad Holmes does it. And whether or not he's the best GM or he could be better, or the Lions have not lived up to, quote unquote, the talent level on the team, I still get to study it. And I still get to let it inform my opinion as to what the team is doing. And that lets me not be upset as much when things don't go our way. Right? We were 15-2 last year. If I was me, I would. My perfect season is 17-0, and you win every game by 30 points. Like that's my perfect season. Like I will never ever have that. So I can either be upset at the fact that I'm never going to have that, or I can learn how to be happy with what is actually in front of me. And the Lions have given me way more to be happy about than to be angry about, right? And because I'm such a fan of the draft, yeah, so I'm cool. You're cool at 12 wins and a playoff berth. Okay. I think that's certainly on the table, right? So if you make the playoffs, you've got a chance to win a Super Bowl. And that is what I think that Brad Holmes has done very well with the roster reconstruction of the Detroit Lions, is that they are going to have a really good chance, so long as he and Dan Campbell are here, to get 12 wins and a playoff berth. And then once you're in the tournament, right, anything can happen. So unfortunately, the last 2 times we've done it, we had a terrible second half against San Francisco, which knocked us out of the Super Bowl. And all of a sudden, Washington shows up as this like world beater and kicks our teeth in, right? So the next evolution of what I want the Detroit Lions to be is, all right, you go out and you play to the level of your talent week in and week out. Yeah, I mean all of this is about emotion, and hope. Like the thing that I think that the NFL draft or most sports drafts give their fan bases is a lot of hope. What's next season look like? Now we have these other good players. What's next season look like? Ooh, we're going to be good, right? Drinking the Kool-Aid, like being a homer, like all of these terms that basically reflect the fact that teams and their fan bases especially have more hope. Like that's what the trade deadline is. It's kind of like a miniature NFL draft. So what I think a lot of people want at the trade deadline by their teams making any move is a resurgence of hope. Like, oh, okay, we've added player X. This is how now I can think about how player X affects A, B, and C on the team. And because A, B, and C are affected, that's going to lead to, W's, in the win column for us, on Sundays. And it certainly could work out that way, right? But like who made moves at this trade deadline? Indianapolis made a big move. They're already 7-2. They're doing great. Is it likely that if they didn't get Ahmad Gardner, they'd probably still be winning football games? Yeah. Will they win more football games with Ahmad Gardner? Maybe. That's certainly what they're banking on. The Dallas Cowboys made some moves, right? To shore up their defense. Their offense is playing really good. So if they can just shore up their defense a little bit, one could argue that if you'd signed Micah Parsons 18 months ago for what the Browns just gave Myles Garrett, that you wouldn't have had to make these moves, right? And everything would be copacetic in Dallas. Like, I think that the moves that Dallas had to make were because they had poor roster construction and dealing with their own players for years. And that's Jerry Jones's fault. And he's trying to make up for it now. So Philadelphia, Philly made moves. Philly brought in Jalen Phillips, right? Okay, so maybe that works out. But they are bringing in a kid who has a lot of talent, has not realized that talent, and he is going to be a rotational pass rusher. So, I don't know that there is a difference between bringing in Jalen Phillips and them signing Josh Uche from the Colts in the offseason. How are those two things different? One, they are both the same type of pass rusher who have not realized their potential, and Philly is banking that one of them is going to realize it. And Josh Uche hasn't. Right. And they are stacked because they draft a lot of these guys and they trade for a lot of these guys. Remember, they also traded for Tank Bigsby, from the Jags earlier in the season just to get a backup running back. And people were like, what's Howie doing? But now he's got somebody that, no one else is Saquon Barkley in the NFL, but he's got somebody that can do some of the things that Saquon can do on the team that he maybe didn't have before, right? Brad prefers to do these things through the draft. Howie is more comfortable doing them at any point in the season. So different approaches to get the highest man rating. Keep working out. We draft to remember. So, yeah. So, of those guys, unfortunately, Levi and Muzurike's career has been ruined by injuries, right? Broderick Martin, I don't know what his problem was, but he just never seemed to realize his potential. And Pascal, I think they'll re-sign, and he'll just be kind of a rotational, versatile piece. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets like a Derek Barnes-esque extension, 3 years, 8 to 10 million bucks, and you're just a guy. Like, you're not bad, but you're not great. Like, you're a backup. Josh Pascal is a backup on most NFL teams, which means that like they could spend their first round pick on a guy that could play in front of him. Like, if I was, my fervent hope, not expectation, but hope, is that the Detroit Lions go into this offseason and attack the pass rush position the same way that they have attacked rebuilding their secondary. Alim McNeill generates pressure. He's good at that. Aiden Hutchinson is a beast. He's good at that. DJ Reader, I mean, he's going to be an unrestricted free agent. We'll see whether or not they re-sign him. I probably would try. But it's that other spot. Like, they have said that they are going to re-sign Ahmad Hassanein when he comes back from his injury designation. Okay, I'm cool if Ahmad Hassanein is your third stringer. And if it was Pascal Hassanein ? As the starter, and you go all in and you trade up, I don't know, to like right now, if the draft were today, the Lions have the 21st pick in the draft. Right. So like, I'm not sure if he's been healthy enough for $8 million a year. Okay. I mean, that makes sense. So they probably do. I mean, I think they would probably let guys like Reader, Anzalone, Pascal go out into the market and see let them gauge what their value is, and then come back. And like guys like Anzalone and Pascal, I think that they're going to go out into the market and they're going to be like, oh, there's not a lot there for us. And that's how I ended up on the $8 million number, is because that's what I think they're going to have to settle at to be on the Lions next year, as opposed to taking the same number and like uprooting their families and going to a new situation in some other city. But our FAs have been stellar too. Davenport, Lopez. I feel like there's some sarcasm in that statement. And so I think they signed Roy Lopez because he does things that DJ Reader does. Right. And then the problem with Marcus Davenport is that he simply cannot remain healthy. Like, I would not be surprised if Marcus Davenport is not on the team next year, just to free up a spot, because I think that my hope is that they attack that position pretty hard. Like, I wouldn't mind signing like a veteran backup, kind of like the 1-year prove it deals for a different player who isn't Marcus Davenport, and then spending a high draft pick in either day 1 or day 2 on a guy that I think can do something across from Aiden Hutchinson. Like, I understand that they want to be strong against the run, but like, I think it's so much more important to have a decent pass rush right now. And like, most of the time I am against trading up in the NFL draft, especially in the first round. I'd much rather trade down. But this team is pretty stacked. And like, I think that they are going to re-sign the top 4 picks from the 22 class. And, that's, we talked about the 7 guys or whatever that the Lions have given extensions to. I think that all the guys, the top 4 guys in the 22 class, are going to get those same kinds of things. And spending 3/3 on a wide receiver, you can just. So, I mean, like, I was not a huge fan of the Tesla trade up. Like, I was also not a fan of the Broderick Martin trade up, but they're on the team now, and like, it is clear to me now that Brad Holmes is not a stick and draft GM. And it's going to be clear to, I think that if anything, I would anticipate him to become even more aggressive when it comes to like, we don't have the roster spots for a 7-player draft every year now. Like, this was the first year since the Brad Holmes era started where they didn't have their normal number of UDFAs signed out of camp, even for their 90-man roster. So, I mean, like, that is just one small indicator of the fact that, like, there's no more space. So if you're going to use, like, that fuck them picks, Les Snead style, like, Les Snead wanted to go out into the NFL and acquire proven talent. I think that Brad Holmes will want to trade up in the NFL draft for potential talent, and so that might work. And when it does work, it's great because you get a really talented player on one of the cheapest fucking contracts you'll ever get, because the NFL CBA means every rookie that has ever come in under the CBA in the last 11 years is underpaid for the entirety of their rookie deal. And Brad has hit on a lot of his first and second round picks. I can quibble about some of them, but like he's hit on a lot of them. And and like I think that like you'll see with Tesla the same kind of things that we've seen out of like Jack Campbell, and the same things that we've kind of seen out of Brian Branch, which is like the first year you can see the potential and you can see like what the reasoning was as to why they wanted him on the field. Can you imagine Isaac Tesla making the kinds of catches that we have seen from him on a semi-regular basis? If you trot out Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Isaac Tesla, and Tesla becomes what they hope, you have prototypical wide receivers for every philosophy of wide receiver that the NFL has on one team, and they're all starters. I mean, and that could be us as soon as next year. Just throw in Laporta and Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs on top of it. How old will Goff be by the time that happens? Well, he's 31 right now. So, I mean, the answer that I would go with is 32. Let's talk about Goff, and then I'll be done with the show for today. I don't think the Detroit Lions can win a Super Bowl with Jared Goff. I think that Jared Goff is a great human being. I think that he has maximized his ability with the Detroit Lions, and a lot of people in Michigan love him, right? And I think that he is given, like most quarterbacks, he is given more credit than is due for winning, and receives more blame when they lose. I think he is not that guy with the right protection. So the Lions, my issue is that the Lions have to be perfect for Jared Goff to be good. And I would rather have, and this is gonna be, Goff is as capable of winning us a ring as Jalen Hurts. I disagree. And the reason why is that Jalen Hurts offers less passing than Jared Goff. I feel pretty confident in that. But he offers so much more running because Jared Goff offers none of it. And I think that the difference in the ability to run outweighs the difference between them as passers. That's just my opinion. So here's why. Like, there are so many times, and I think that Sunday was a good example of it. Jared Goff thinks that he can get away from pressure. He cannot. He cannot get away from pressure. He is not athletic enough. He cannot extend plays. He cannot create outside of the pocket. He does not change down in distance with his legs. That Jalen Hurts can do all of those things. Now, is he elite at them? No. Is he capable of doing those things? Yes. And the thing that I want most for this Lions offense is a quarterback who plays the way that J.J. McCarthy played against them on Sunday. If you could find next year's version of J.J. McCarthy, whether it's a quarterback that you take in the draft, whether it's the Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, nailed it, good at football. Sam Darnold, like Baker Mayfield, career resurgent quarterback, which Jared Goff kind of is. If you could find the next version of that, I'm interested, do you have to change? I think that there's not a lot that you have to have a quarterback be able to do to replicate what Jared Goff does. Like if you put Baker Mayfield on the Lions and you said, Baker, 9 out of 10 times we want you to throw the ball to either Sam Laporta or Amon-Ra St. Brown. Hey, we're running these routes. I would be like, if I was Baker Mayfield, I'd be like, cool. Those routes aren't hard to run. And he has the arm to do it. And like, speaking of an arm, Jared Goff does not have a big one. I would not be surprised if there was some perfect measurement of how strong NFL throwing arms are, if Goff was somewhere like between 25 and 32 of starting quarterbacks in the NFL. Probably way closer to 32 now that I think about it. So, I mean, like, sure. So, like, I think that's a very valid opinion, fan man. But, like, if you give Joe Burrow elite protection, he'll carve you up. If you give Baker Mayfield elite protection, he'll carve you up. Like, that's just it. It's not about giving a quarterback elite protection. The Lions have to give Jared Goff elite protection, and there's no other plan. So, but if a quarterback like, yeah, like if a quarterback like, what's a good example here? Let's take Bryce Young as an example, right? He is super short, right? He has trouble seeing over his offensive lineman, but he can get out of the pocket and break structure and be effective as a quarterback. But our system is built around Goff. Well, is it? I mean, like, if you ask, so like, is Goff so limited in his playmaking ability that another quarterback can't be asked to step in and do what Jared Goff does? I think that they can. Like, if you put Matthew Stafford on the Detroit Lions right now, what do they look like? Right? Matthew Stafford can make all these throws to Sam Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. He can also throw deep. He's not a runner by any stretch, right? But like, so I think that like there are key things that the Lions could look for in another quarterback that are the things that Jared Goff does well: reading a defense, making a check, throwing the ball over the middle of the field, right? So like Russell Wilson would be a terrible fit for this offense, right? Russell Wilson hates throwing the ball to tight ends. He wants to push the ball down the field, outside the boundaries, right? He's the opposite of what the Detroit Lions would want, on the team. But like, if you found somebody like, to maybe go back, what was that kid's name that was the Bengals quarterback for years before Burrow? Redheaded kid, Andy something. I don't believe that Jared Goff can throw down the sideline. I don't see it. Andy Dalton, thank you. Like, if you found slightly more athletic Andy Dalton, I think that he could do what Jared Goff is doing year 2 of being in the offense, right? The problem is going to be that as soon as you take the first year after Jared Goff, whenever that is not the quarterback of the league, the Detroit Lions, it's going to be a step back. It will have to be a step back until you're comfortable doing what the offense asks. But like, there's also like the thing, like Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell built this offense around what Jared Goff is good at. Well, I don't know that it's much of a rebuild. I mean, like, that's just it. Like, the Lions and Brad Holmes took their floor from like here, and moved it up, so like, when you get a quarterback that doesn't, know, it's going to bring it back down to here, somewhere, but it's still higher than this. Like, I don't know that that's a rebuild. Like, what the Jets are doing is a rebuild. Like, I would say that like Howie Roseman does like a tiny little rebuild, almost every year, just by like, but he has a lot more turnover on his roster than the Lions do. So, and it does feel like that, fan man. Like, it does kind of feel like, oh, if Frank Ragnow is here, a lot of these problems are solved, right? So like I do think that there's very specific things that the Lions could go out and try to acquire, that may not make. Can you find a center that does, he's probably not going to be as big and as smart as Frank Ragnow, but could you go out and find a guy that is as smart but smaller? Can you go out and can you find a guy that is almost as good as Jared Goff doing like the intermediate of the field things, but has a little bit more athleticism, avoids a sack, can push the ball down the field to Jameson Williams occasionally? I would be interested to see what the Lions look like with that. And if they wanted to trade up and get like a Dante Moore or Fernando Mendoza, I mean, it would have to be a huge move up. Like, I'm not going to bitch about that this year, because you're going to pay Jared Goff $70 million next year. And if they want to keep the salary cap nice and smooth and working, like, you're going to have to like get a rookie quarterback on a deal, or you're going to have to get somebody like Daniel Jones, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, who are on that like 4-year, $100 million kind of contract, because it's like half of what they're paying Jared Goff. And I just don't think that Jared Goff is worth twice what Baker Mayfield is worth, or I don't think that he's worth 4 times what JJ McCarthy is currently worth to the Minnesota Vikings. That's the point. It's like, I respect Jared Goff. I understand what Jared Goff is good and bad at, but like the team can never stand still. The team has to constantly evolve. And like the shelf life on Jared Goff on the Detroit Lions might be closer to the end than it isn't. We'll see. They'll probably re-sign him. Yeah, exactly. So like, here's my thing, right? So like this kid from Penn State, Drew Aller, has a horrible season. He gets hurt. If he misses like his ability to like go through the offseason stuff, who knows how far he falls, right? If he's there at, say, let's say the Lions are picking 23rd, 24th in the draft. If he's there at 23rd, why not take him and put him on the bench for 2 years? Here, kid, heal up. Here, kid. I mean, he is the same height, weight as Jared Goff. He's got a much better arm, and he has some mobility. I mean, and then you can have Jared Goff be on the team for 2 years, and there'll be like a realistic, non-stupid Hendon Hooker succession plan at QB. I mean, like, that makes so much sense to me, to be prepping for like the most important change the football team can go through years in advance, So anyways, I'm going to call it there, guys. My voice is starting to go. Good talk. Like to seeing everybody in the chat. So we had Zaquaa, Fan Man, Dr. Detroit. I'm forgetting people. Maybe that was just it. Maybe it was. Oh, and Donkey Kong showed up. So it was good to see you guys. Hopefully the Lions can. I don't know if the game is. They are in DC this week, so hopefully the Lions can go to DC, pick up a win, get to 6-3, and hopefully the Packers can drop another one to some NFL bottom feeder, and give us that game back. So here's hoping. Trade deadline has passed us. We have who we have, and we're gonna have to make that work. So, anyways, hope we'll try and be back here next Thursday at noon. Hope you guys can join us then. All right, bye.